Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. I've seen some other creators make videos kind of like this before. Nothing that is like specifically standing out as like a direct reminder, but it's just kind of a topic that I wanted to check out with you guys. And as you can tell by the title, this one is Romances That Surprised Me. Things that can surprise me can be all over the map, obviously, and you'll see that with this group. I did end up going back a couple years for this because I have some from last year, even some like pretty early in 2022, well, one specifically that we'll talk about, that has just never really left my mind. And I, think about, as they say, rent-free some of these often. Some of them really like turned me on to new authors for the first time, or made me look at an author differently than I had before, or just ended up being like my favorite book by that author when I maybe thought I already had a favorite book by them. So like I said, this list will be kind of varied. I also, for the sake of brevity, won't go too deep into some of these because you'll see as I go through, a lot of them are books that I have talked ad nauseum about because some of them are 6-star books, some of them are just recent faves that get put into a lot of things. But because, each video will call to someone else on a different level, so you never know which video someone is hearing about a book for you, from you, you know what I mean? But yeah, let's just go through my list of books here, and then and then I will have links down below to all of these. If you use my affiliate links, it does give a little bit of kickback. If you are planning to buy one of the books that I recommended, you can check it out there, or it's just a, handy convenience shopping list for you with all the books that I mentioned in here. So let us go back a bit to the beginning, as I said, and at least this is the furthest one back that is the book that surprised me. And yes, I do have the absolutely gorgeous cover of this one that I'm going to show you. So Between Wrath and Mercy by Jess Wisecup is a romantic fantasy or fantasy romance that I discovered like last March. I saw this random TikTok that had this book. It had just come out, and it was selling me on the fact that this has a plus size heroine who is a mother and is in her late 30s, and it is a second chance romance with her and the love of her life. She is currently married to someone else after a series of misfortunes, and she has a child with this man. And then her daughter and husband disappear. And so she's forced to return to, as I said, the previous love of her life, Prince Rain, because he has the power and the ability to assist her finding her daughter with really no questions asked. He's like, I'm in, let's go. And so this book, a good chunk of it is about these two who, they haven't seen each other since the day that they were separated way back when. And so there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of hurt, there was some misunderstandings, but there was some very intense things happening, and they were very young when they were split apart and their lives went different directions, but neither of them has forgot the other person. And seeing how their romance plays, how it was playing out when they were children, and now revisiting it so many years later as adults, what is there to pull them back to each other again? Has enough changed? Has enough stayed the same where they still feel pulled to each other? Who's to say? We're going to find out. But I really loved how Jess did this. I feel like this is a very well-written story. The first half of this book could be a lot to get through. She is setting up a lot, and this was her first book that she wrote. And I think she did such an amazing job. And these books have just blown up. I'm so proud. I'm so impressed. I have an interview with her on my channel. You should definitely check out if you have time. And yeah, this was the bookish box edition of hers. And yeah, I absolutely love it. So this was one that really surprised me. And last year I really pushed it at people quite a bit because it felt so good to find a fantasy romance again that was equal parts fantasy and romance, and had a heroine who was plus size and she was a mother and she was in her 30s. Like, there's just so many of those things that don't happen in fantasy, because even in fantasy romance, it's usually a very young woman's game. And I like how this played out. So highly, highly recommend. And I promise not to say that for every book. Anyway, let us keep going. All right, then we have a more recent one for me, and I've shared my story with this quite a few times. So again, I won't go into it too much. And I also think that you've probably heard about this book ad nauseum. But for me, it was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I've shared, yes, I do have the pretty edges, completely by accident. I grabbed this book on audio the day that it came out, because my friends were going to be doing a live show chatting about it. And so I grabbed the audiobook, and then I heard there was pretty sprayed edges. So I was like, well, I'm going to pre-order, like, I'm going to order the book anyway. So I ordered it the day it came out, and I grabbed the audio. And then I went about, like, reading this book in almost one sitting. I had such a great time with it. And I know that it isn't perfect and there's a lot of things, but it is the first book in a series. And I think that Rebecca Yarros, for me, did a damn fine job at least getting me very interested in this story and introducing characters that I'm extremely excited for. And I can't wait to see what she does next with them. And I just love the dragons, and I love the connection between dragon and rider. Though it's not my favorite dragon rider book I've ever read, I mean, that still goes to Aragon. It was a revelation to me because I had no expectation. I know some of you are reading this already with the hype so high, you know, and there's no way to escape that if you're on Instagram or BookTube or TikTok. Like, there's no way to escape it. But I managed to escape it. I had only heard my friends were going to read it. I'd seen it on NetGalley. Gosh, do I wish I had asked for the arc of this. But at the same time, I'm glad that I read it when I did, because this was just a great time to me. So this has like a dragon rider school. It has a disabled heroine. It has sassy dragons, and it has, you know, a country that is in the middle of a war, and so they're trying to train dragon riders to fight with them. But of course, there's some corruption within the kingdom, including some corruption that may be within our heroine's own family. And so, yeah, I love how it was playing out, and I am so excited to read more. So this was a revelation to me, and I loved it. I'm just going to go through my stack right here. So then, I've mentioned this one quite a few times too. This is Coldhearted by Heather Greer. It's funny now that I like look at this cover. I love this cover. I actually love all the covers in this series. But this cover has like not a lot to do with what's in the book. Like, I don't know, this look for this heroine, although I can kind of pull that off today, I guess. She's a school teacher in a small town in Alaska, and there's werewolves in this town. And for me, this read as like, not Twilight fan fiction, but if you were Team Jacob and you feel like Jacob missed out and you thought maybe Edward was a psycho who was stalking a teenager, this might be for you. Because in this one, the vampire is bad and the werewolves are good. There are other books in this series where we meet good vampires. But I love this. I had so much fun. I, again, didn't have any thoughts about this one. I think I also saw this one, like, I can't remember if it literally popped up in my Kindle Rex or what, but I grabbed it because of the cover, and the premise was this woman going to a small isolated town, and I really love small town romance, and I like things that take place in like the winter in Alaska, so I think that's what like drew me in. And then I heard there was paranormal elements, so yeah, I absolutely had a great time with this one. So I highly recommend. I don't want to tell you any more about it than I already did, because I want you to be surprised too. All right, then we have God of Malice. This is another one I've been bringing up a ton. I had basically given up on this author. I just wasn't into the way that she told stories. I thought a lot of her heroes were too mean to the heroines. I didn't like a lot of the third act conflicts that were happening in her books. And I had enjoyed a duet of hers, but other than that, I had been being really disappointed. And so after a certain point, I just stopped reading her. But at the beginning of this year, because a couple of my viewers have really, really been encouraging me to read this one. They've really been pushing it at me, including a viewer, not one of my readers, one of my viewers who is a really good friend, and she just really, really loved this book series. So in January, I always do a vlog the first week of the year, and I did a vlog where I gave authors a second chance for a couple of the books I read. So I put up 2 authors that I would give a second chance to. No surprise, this book won. And so I read this, and I actually annotated it while I was reading it. And I was really floored. It had a lot of, like, I like psychopath romance, but it usually is like way, way too dark for me. And this is dark. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. This book starts with an opening similar to Untouchable. Like, our hero gets the heroine in a vulnerable place and assaults her. But what is interesting about this book is that, unlike Zoe, who doesn't have anyone looking out for her or anyone she can turn to, the heroine in this book, she is from a powerful family too, because this is a 2nd generation series, even 3rd generation for some of the kids. And like, she could make it stop, but she ends up feeling like she kind of deserves what he's doing to her in a sick way, and ends up liking what he's doing to her. So she doesn't try to get away, and she acknowledges she can make it stop, that this is really more dub-con than it is non-con, or even consensual non-consent at a certain point. It's definitely dub-con, non-con in that very first scene, but all subsequent things, she could make it stop, and she doesn't, and I liked that, and I liked the mind games. And I also liked reading a hero who has a good family too, because, right, he is the 2nd generation, so his parents are a couple that we've read before, or if you've read them before, and so he doesn't come from a bad family. So why is he the way he is? How did he get this way? And I really enjoyed that, and I have enjoyed the subsequent books in this series. I'm very much looking forward to Is God of Ruin going to be the 4th one? I'm not sure. But it's going to be Landon's book, and I am so intrigued in his, because he's almost a villain through this series. I mean, they're all slightly villains, but I loved this so much. So yeah, that one kind of surprised me. And the audiobooks for this are really good as well. Sticking with the dark romance side of things, another series that kind of took me by surprise this year was the Dark Heart series by J.G. Cole. So this is the first book in the series, Deviant Hearts. And the way that I got this one, so I'd seen J.G. Cole before. I hadn't really thought about the fact that this was a male author, a male mafia romance author, which there are a few of those, by the way. There's another one too that I just have never got around to reading his books yet, but I found him through TikTok. And so I've been wanting to read male romance authors who actually write like sexy or erotic or like dark romance, because I wanted to see what they brought to it. And what happened here is that Valentine PR, I am part of their master list. And when you're part of that, you fill out this quiz for them and you tell them the types of romances you're willing to have. So they will sometimes send you random packages with like backlist titles or other things. Excuse me. Sorry, I had a phone call that I had to exit out of. Where was I going? And they sent me this in the mail. And when I opened the package, I was like, hello, Mr. Sexy. Because I hadn't gotten actually dark romance from them before. Because it's limited what they have. It's random what they have when they have extra copies of things. And sometimes I have found some really great books from them. And other times they're ones that don't quite fit into what you want. But we happened to be coming up upon the Mafia Romance Readathon when they sent me this. So I was like, this is perfect. Because this book was out and the second book was just coming out. And I read this and I really, really enjoyed this. This one is, begins the series off with this arranged marriage between the Greek mafia family and the Irish family. So in this one we have Neve, I believe it's Neve, who is of the Irish family, and her uncle Killian is setting up this marriage. And then we have Ares, who's a part of the Greek family. And so they are right on the brink of war. There's been a lot of like stuff that's been happening. And so they want to put this war off because they know that they would devastate each other's families. So yeah, that happens. And I really fell for his characters. He definitely writes very edgy men, very dark. The sex is amazing, by the way. Like, it almost gets like super intense. His are all like 4 to 5 spicy peppers for me. But also his men love so big. And I also have found, you know how we say like some men don't know how to write women, which I totally agree with. But I also think that we get a little bit cocky and we say that like women know how to write men, but men can't know how to write women. I think that can be true in some cases, but I also think there's plenty of women who don't write men well, and there's plenty of men who will write women just fine. You know what I mean? Like, nothing should ever be a blanket term. But what I enjoy about his books particularly is I like reading like the camaraderie in the men, like how he writes that, you know, the behind the scenes of the mafia stuff, as well as how he writes male pleasure in books. Like how he describes a male orgasm, how he describes sex as a man, I think is so interesting. And there's some very subtle differences to how women write it that I think makes it like so sexy in how he writes it. I don't know. The sex is just really hot. There's lots of kinky, dark, some BDSM in his. But it's also just a little bit on the edge of bonkers where I love it so much. So there is 3 books out in the series. Book 4 is coming out very soon. I'm actually reading it right now. I got an arc of it because I've now been on the arc team for this series. And I'm obsessed. Okay, I'm obsessed. I love his dark men that he has written. And I highly, highly recommend this series if you love, who's the edgier ones that I really like? You know, like if you like Michelle Hurd, or like Mila Finelli, or even some of Sophie's books, but not all of them. Hers are even just they're a bit softer than his are. But if you want it like dark and edgy, but not like rapey, he's a good choice. I don't know another way to say that. Really good. Yeah, just totally blew me away, and I want to read more of his backlist for sure. All right, then I have a historical to share. So this one is When the Earl Met His Match. So this is Stacey Reid. So it's no surprise that I would love a Stacey Reid. I have read about 15 of her books, and I pretty much have loved all of them. I don't think I've rated any of them lower than a 4. And I was very excited to read this one. This is book 4 in her Wedded by Scandal series. You know, they all have some drama going on somehow. So it wasn't necessarily that I didn't think I would like it. This one has a heroine who has an accidental pregnancy and she needs help because her parents are trying to force her to have the baby and give it away. They're going to like lock her up to do this. And she has this Earl that she's been a pen pal with. Or it's an Earl's son, only she doesn't know that it's an Earl. So when she goes to this man that she's been writing back and forth to offer herself as a bride, she doesn't realize that she would be interrupting a family line and that their child, you know, that she would be, because she was always going to foist this child upon this person, but she didn't realize he was an Earl and that, you know, her child could potentially be like a cuckoo in the nest. But there's a whole lot that she doesn't know about the situation she's walking into. This hero is also mute, and so there's sign language that's used in here, which I really like. But in the beginning, there is some, you know, communication barrier until she starts to learn it, and until they find ways to communicate. But I love this so much. This was a 6-star read of mine, and I loved how Stacey wrote both of these characters, and it just really blew me away, and it became my favorite Stacey Reid. So I wasn't expecting one of her backlist titles to become one of my favorites. So that's why this was a surprise to me, for sure. Then I have a very recent read, actually, which is You and Me by Steph Bohrer. This one was actually picked by a patron. If you don't know, I have a Patreon. If you like this video, maybe consider supporting my Patreon. I do have a link to that down below. But one of my Patreon tiers is that I do some annotated books every month. And this was one that was picked, and I was totally fine with that. I've read a Steph Bohrer before, but I hadn't read any since. And I know a lot of people had read more of his books during Pride Month, and so I was getting a lot of request to read him. And so this just worked out perfect that someone picked it. And so this one is it's two dads who both have sons that are in football. And one of them is a gay man who's out, and he is like, helps on the booster club. His son is like the star player on the team. And our other hero, who is the POV character of this one, our other hero, Luke, he is a widower. Him and his son have this big gap between them now, and he's very much mourning the loss of his son before, you know, his son is even done with school. And he misses having a good relationship with his son so badly. It is such an ache. And he's desperate to connect with his son before it's too late. And so he ends up volunteering with the boosters. And so Luke, the name of our POV character, he gets kind of taken under the wing of Landon, who's this other dad I mentioned. And it turns out their sons are kind of like best friends now. And through that, like, they end up becoming friends. And then, like, the four of these guys, the two guys and their two sons, they do so much stuff together. And eventually, Luke starts to have romantic feelings for Landon. Now, he's never been attracted to another man before, but this attraction grows out of genuine friendship. And he, you know, makes it known that it isn't just curiosity that has me interested in you. Like, I've fallen for you. And it's... Guys, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And so this was a 6-star read for me recently. And I've already read some more Tal as well. That'll be in a weekly wrap-up I'm doing. And I will be reading more for sure. I won't be sleeping on them anymore for sure. I want to read them. All right, then there was another one I read this month that was a Patreon book. And that was Unbreak My Heart by Nicole Jacqueline. This one was a very heavy book. I won't even dance around it. This one is about a woman who, her best friend dies in the beginning. And the thing is, her best friend had 3 children and was pregnant when she was in a car accident. And that child lives. So she has 4 childless children. And the husband of her friend is a soldier. He's an active duty soldier. He goes on deployments, you know, pretty regularly. And when this friend dies, she kind of becomes a pseudo mother and a nanny and best friend who helps. And her and the hero have a very complicated relationship. She's actually the reason that he met his wife. And he was actually like a foster son to her aunt and uncle. So he was like a foster cousin, but he didn't join the family until he was in his late teens. And then he, you know, he calls her aunt and uncle mom and dad. But, you know, they never had a cousin relationship. And she actually used to have a huge crush on him. And then the first year of college, she brought home her roommate and best friend. And he fell for her and kind of stole her best friend in a way. But she's always been around helping her friend whenever he's deployed. And now she becomes someone he leans on. But he's very grudging about it. And it's very clear he kind of resents that he's attracted to her. And on the 1-year anniversary of her death, they end up sleeping together. And it ends up being pretty traumatic for both of them. He's very angry that it happened. And she's very hurt by it, that he's so angry and like blames her for this. And to top it off, she becomes pregnant because of this as well. So very complicated emotions and everything. And this book does rip your guts out. It really does. And there was a point in this book where I did not think it possible that I could forgive this hero. I'm not even joking you. I was like, Nicole Jacqueline, what have you done? I will never forgive this hero. He can just go die and let her keep all the children. But then his eyes are open in a really big way, and he does grovel and win her back. And he does unbreak her heart. So it was beautiful. It was beautiful. So I highly recommend. All right, just a couple left here. So another one is Berries and Greed by Lily Mayne. This was also a recent release, and it's not so much that Lily Mayne being on a favorites list that is a surprise. I really have loved Lily Mayne for a couple years now. I've really enjoyed it, but this was her first FM romance. This was her first male-female pairing before. And it is still like a monster romance. Our hero is this type of monster that is actually revered by a cult that she is a part of in the beginning of this. She is over 30. He doesn't fit the typical style of his breed of being, and so he's been very like ostracized and kind of mistreated by his own kind and kind of ridiculed. But he ends up offering her to be his roommate to help her escape from this cult. And slowly, as their roommates, they begin to realize they are both attracted to each other and that their kinks might align with each other. She actually has very like dominant feelings, and he has very like submissive tendencies, and that is something that hasn't been accepted by his kind. They very much expect their men to be dominating, and so that's something he's gotten a lot of ridicule from, and a previous partner made him feel very bad about himself for wanting the things he wanted. And Beryl ends up being able to provide that for him. And it's just very beautiful. There's lots of toys, lots of fun stuff used in this, and just a very tender romance, which is something that Lily does very well. And then the last one I wanted to mention, because the next book in this series actually just dropped today, and so I wanted to bring this one up again because I've never seen anyone else talk about it besides the Facebook group where I first discovered it. And this is called Letters to Dogwood by Tanya Fisher. And this is a historical romance. It is an open door, spicy one. The cover on this kind of said like inspirational romance to me when I first saw it, but it's not. It's definitely an open door thing. But this begins with a heroine who's actually running away from, like, her mother is trying to push her into an arranged marriage, and her father owns like a hotel and a business in this small town in Dogwood. And so she has run away on this train, but her mother is sending people after her, and there is this gentleman who's also going that direction, who she gets to, like, through them talking, he reluctantly agrees to be her like traveling companion, like pretend to be her fiance, so that the people looking for her, they're looking for a single woman alone. They're not looking for her partnered with someone. And he wants to make sure she stays safe, and she wants to get away from her mom. And once they both get to this small town where they're going, he needs to continue on to get to his land, to get to his ranch, and she, you know, needs to go find her father and let him know what's going on. And then we enter another phase of the book where he's checking in on her and they're writing letters back and forth, and eventually things progress with them. It doesn't take as long as you like think that it would, but eventually this becomes, you know, these two are together and they're facing the challenges of the world together. So this is kind of a Western romance. Doesn't rely on that like too much, but I just really enjoyed this. It was a really unique historical. This is an indie author, and yeah, the next book, as I said, just came out. It's called Poppies and Silk, and I cannot wait to read it because there was just something about her writing that I loved. And I love that this had the style of an old school romance, but it still had a really beautiful, like, you know, it didn't have the rapey feels, and it didn't have the, you know, like old school consent issues that sometimes happen. It was just a really beautiful historical romance. So there you go. So there you go. Those are 10 romances that surprised me in the last couple of years. As I said, I will have links to all of them down below if you'd like to check them out. Please check out my Patreon or channel memberships if you're interested in supporting me here. But if none of that works out to you, if none of that's of interest, please at least like this video and tell me a book that surprised you in the last couple of years. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and I'll see you next time.